Looking for magic cards? At flipsidegaming.com you can now use the promo code LVD to get a 10% discount on orders over $10 while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another episode of Friendly Friday, a weekly series where we take a look at budget, standard or modern decks, and this week we're taking a look at black-white vampires in standard, featuring a lot of the new vampires from Ixalan. So let's dive right into it here, starting out with our 1-drops, where we have 4 copies of Duskborne Skymarcher, a nice 1 mana 1/1 flyer that has an activated ability where we can tap it, pay a mana, and give target attacking vampire +1/+1 until end of turn. So the evasive body of the Skymarcher is actually quite important in the deck, since we have multiple cards that require us to attack with multiple creatures, so having a creature with flying means we don't have to worry about any blockers, so we can attack without fear. Next up we have 4 copies of Legion's Landing, a nice 1 mana legendary enchantment that when it enters the battlefield we get a 1/1 vampire token with lifelink, and then if we attack with 3 or more creatures we get to transform Legion's Landing into Adanto the First Fort, which is a legendary land that we can tap for white mana, or we can pay 3, tap it and make a 1/1 vampire creature token with lifelink, so very nice ability going into the late game, and so this is one of the many cards in the deck that requires to attack with multiple creatures, which is where the Duskborne Skymarcher shines. Next up we have 4 copies of Fatal Push, just a nice efficient removal spell to deal with opposing creatures, and it's not too difficult to enable Revolt in the deck since we have a lot of cheap vampire tokens that we can trade off in combat and enable Revolt that way, and we also have some deserts that we can sacrifice to enable Revolt easily, so there's that. Next up we have 4 copies of Metallic Mimic, which may not look like a vampire, but it's a shapeshifter, and as it enters a battlefield we choose a creature type, which is going to be vampire in this deck, so Metallic Mimic will be a vampire in addition to its other types, and for each subsequent vampire that enters a battlefield under our control we get to put a +1/+1 counter on it, which of course is very powerful when you have multiple cards that make a lot of vampire tokens that all get the +1/+1 counter, so very powerful card that the opponent has to deal with right away, otherwise they're in big trouble. Then we have 4 copies of Adanto Vanguard, a 2 mana 1/1, but as long as Adanto Vanguard is attacking it gets +2/+0, so attacks as a nice 3/1, and we can also pay for life to make the Vanguard indestructible until end of turn, which also helps us with attacking with multiple creatures since we are not gonna risk losing the Vanguard in combat, and of course paying for life is not a big deal in this deck since we have a lot of ways to gain life between our lifelinking creatures. Speaking of lifelinking creatures, we've got 2 copies of Gifted Aetherborn, 2 mana for a 2/3 with Death Touch and lifelink, so very powerful against any big green creatures as we can trade off thanks to Death Touch. The double black in the mana cost is a little tricky, so we might not always be able to play the Aetherborn on turn 2, but even later in the game it's still a very powerful play. Then we have 3 copies of Mavren Fein, a Dusk Apostle, 3 mana for a 2/2, but whenever 1 or more non-token vampires we control attacks, we get to make a 1/1 vampire creature token with lifelink, so yet another card that requires us to attack with our vampires, which is where cards like the Skymarcher and the Vanguard are really important, as you can attack with them unpunished. Then we also have 2 copies of Queen's Commission, which for 3 mana makes 2 1/1 vampire creature tokens with lifelink. And then the big payoff card for being in a vampire deck is Sanctum Seeker, 4 mana for a 3/4 that says whenever a vampire we control attacks we get to drain the opponent for 1 essentially, so we make the opponent lose 1 life and we gain 1 life, which is a very powerful effect. We can even play the Sanctum Seeker and then attack with a whole bunch of vampires the same turn and get to drain the opponent right away. If we can combine Sanctum Seeker with some of our token makers, we can deal a lot of damage out of nowhere, and don't even get me started on having 2 Sanctum Seekers in play at the same time. Then we have 4 copies of Call to the Feast, which is a very efficient way of making vampire tokens, since for 4 mana we get 3 1/1 vampire creature tokens with lifelink that can transform a Legion's Landing all by themselves, and works very well when we have a Metallic Mimic in play or a Sanctum Seeker. And then finally we have 1 copy of Vona, which is a legendary vampire, 4/4 vigilance and lifelink, and we can tap it, pay 7 life to destroy target a non-land permanent during our turn. So this is a very powerful effect since you can attack with Vona thanks to vigilance and still tap her to destroy any non-land permanent, and of course paying 7 life is not a big deal in this deck since we're gaining so much life anyways. Then taking a quick look at the mana base, we've got 4 copies of Concealed Courtyard, which enters the battlefield untapped if it's one of our first 3 lands. We've got 4 copies of Forsaken Sanctuary, kind of as a necessary evil. Always enters the battlefield tapped, but we kind of need mana fixing. Then we've got 4 planes and 4 Shefet Dunes, which is a nice late game effect, as we can sacrifice it and pay 4 mana to give all our creatures +1/+1 until end of turn, which is of course very powerful when you have a bunch of tokens in play. And then 8 swamps. Then quickly going over the sideboard, we have 2 copies of Fragmentize as a way to deal with artifacts or enchantments. We've got 2 copies of Inspiring Cleric for when we need even more life gain against aggressive decks. We've got 2 copies of Ixalan's Binding, mostly to deal with opposing gods that are difficult to deal with otherwise. We've got 4 copies of Duress that come in against any control decks. 2 more copies of Gifted Aetherborn to round out the 2 main deck copies for when we're up against any green mid-range deck where we need to trade off with big green creatures with our Death Touch Aetherborn, or when we need additional life gain. Then we have 2 copies of Dusk to Dawn, which is another very powerful card. So the Dusk part destroys all creatures with power 3 or greater, so unless we have a Metallic Mimic going to town, most of our creatures will survive the Dusk part, and then we can deal with opposing creatures that might be larger. And then the Dawn part for 5 mana, we can return all creatures from our graveyard with power 2 or less, and even cards like Adanto Vanguard that attack as a 3/1 have just 1 power as a default, so we can return those as well. And there are powerful cards like Mavren Fein we can also return, so this is also a very powerful effect in a drawn out game. And finally 1 copy of Vanquisher's Banner for the more grindy games where we need to draw some extra cards, and of course giving all our creatures +1/+1 is also very powerful as we have a lot of token generation. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. So let's take a look at our opener, which looks quite good here, so I think we'll keep. We do have 2 4-drops here, and we don't have a vampire to go with the Mavren Fein since the Legion's Landing will make a token, but overall I think this is still an okay hand. Up against Evolving Wilds Island, and Adanto Vanguard is a nice pickup here, as that gives us the vampire for Mavren to make additional vampire tokens. So leading off with Legion's Landing, and up against blue-black and Search for Azcanta, so this might be the blue-black control deck. Pick up a Skymarcher. So let's get in for 1, and then we'll play out the Vanguard. Which is gonna hit pretty hard, and we can pay for life to save it from removal spells, which the opponent might have. I think the best way for the opponent to deal with the Vanguard if they're on blue-black control is to exile it with a Vraska's Contempt, otherwise we can just make it indestructible. Alright, so we'll untap, and Concealed Courtyard, not a bad pickup. So we're gonna run out Mavren main phase here, just in case we get to connect with the Vanguard. Mavren is probably gonna get countered here or killed, but I don't think we have any better options available. So let's run out Mavren. Could play around Censor, I guess, by playing the Duskborne instead, but if this works out, then we can just win on the spot essentially, and I'm pretty happy trading with the Supreme Will in the spot, so that's fine. And now we get to attack for 4, which is not too shabby. So our opponent is under some pressure, they need to answer the board, and we have more threats incoming. We're probably gonna lead with Call to the Feast, and then we can follow up with Sanctum Seeker, so we get to drain with the 3 tokens right away. Call to the Feast also can't get Essence Scattered. Opponent with a Charter Course, so they might be on the more tap-out version of blue-black and not the draw-go version. As we see a Commit to Memory going to the graveyard, something to keep in mind. Alright, we get to untap, find another Concealed Courtyard, so we're pretty free to resolve whatever we want here. So I think we're just gonna go with the Call to the Feast here. So let's attack for 4. Opponent might use a Fatal Push on either the Vanguard to force us to pay 4 or on the token. And yep, they're just gonna kill the token, that's fine, as we've got more tokens incoming. And next turn we should be able to transform our Legion's Landing, although it's pretty awkward here if we need to play around Censor, since We want to play the Sanctum Seeker main phase 1, but then the Legion's Landing hasn't transformed yet, so we don't have that extra mana to play around Censor. Meanwhile, the opponent transformed their Azcanta. And the opponent has a Gonti, Lord of Luxury, that's fine. Means we get to resolve our Sanctum Seeker and drain the opponent for a bunch. And then we can even play out the Skymarcher with the transformed Legion's Landing. So one thing that could be annoying is if our opponent has a Fatal Push, since they can sacrifice Evolving Wilds to enable Fatal Push to kill our Sanctum Seeker. That's, I think, the only thing that really punishes us, but we already see 2 Fatal Pushes in the graveyard, so it's not super likely that they have a third one. I guess they could always find a Fatal Push with Gonti here, but I don't think they're gonna take a Fatal Push in the dark, not knowing we have the Sanctum Seeker in hand. So Gonti steals a card, and they're gonna sack the Evolving Wilds right away, so that's good news. And they're gonna get a tapped Swamp. Alright, so Vanguard to draw, let's run out Sanctum Seeker. And move to combat. Attack with everyone. Drain for a whole bunch. Our opponent does have a Fatal Push on a token, but they cast it a little late here. So if they waited with their Evolving Wilds, they could have actually killed our Sanctum Seeker. So our opponent down to 8 before combat damage. They're gonna block a life-linking token, so they're gonna take 4 down to 4. And we're gonna follow up with a Skymarcher and a Courtyard. Alright, so we're in a decent spot here, but our opponent does get to untap with a lot of mana and an active Azcanta. Opponent passes. Alright, so I think we just move to combat, attack with everyone, see what happens, since if we do get to attack with the Seeker, our opponent just dies unless they can gain a ton of life, and this would still be a fine trade, and I would rather attack with the Skymarcher than use it to pump anything, so yeah, let's move to combat. Opponent might have a removal spell before we get to attack here. And there we see Torrential Gearhulk. So they might use that to bounce our Sanctum Seeker with the Commit to Memory, perhaps. Yep. Yep, and there we see Commit rather than Memory, which is usually the combo with Torrential Gearhulk. So we're just attacking with our Skymarcher here. And then we can play out another Vanguard. Still have enough mana to activate our Adanto and pass a turn. Opponent's not attacking, we're gonna make an extra Vampire here. Another Legion's Landing to draw. I think we can attack with everyone, since if they block our tokens, then they're taking a bunch of damage from the Vanguards. Looks like another Torrential Gearhulk, which is not great for us, but at least they won't counter our 3-4 next turn. So they have a Fatal Push, probably gonna kill our Flyer. So they get to eat our tokens for free, or they can force us to pay some life, but that's fine here. So let's make these indestructible. Opponent loses 1 to 2. We can make another Legion's Landing, get a token, and pass a turn. We could not have used both Adantos this turn, so there was no reason to play the Legion's Landing main phase. And opponent digs with Azcanta, doesn't find the answer, and we win. Sweet. So managed to win against blue-black control, which might not be the easiest matchup. So what do we want? We definitely want our Duresses. I think we want Ixalan's Binding to answer the Scarab God, and Vanquisher's Banner also seems pretty good. I could see an argument for Dusk to Dawn, as it does answer the opponent's Gearhulks and Scarab Gods and then gets back some of our creatures, but it might be a little too reactive and too slow. So what don't we want? Queen's Commission is probably the least powerful card. And Fatal Pushes we definitely don't want. And what else do we shave? I guess we can shave a Skymarcher since it's pretty low impact. And then the question is, do we want Aetherborns instead of anything else? I don't think we do. This seems fine. So let's submit this and see what happens. Alright, we're on the draw. And this hand's okay. We don't have double black yet for Aetherborn or Sanctum Seeker, but we have Duress into a bunch of creatures, which is a decent place to be. Shefet Dunes the pickup. So yeah, I think we do lead with Duress here, just to clear a path for Metallic Mimic, and just to know what cards we need to play around. So let's Duress the opponents, and see a hand of double Charter Course, Fatal Push, Glimmer, Gearhulk. Alright, so we're, I think, taking the Fatal Push here, and then the opponent can Charter Course all they want. And we'll pass. So next turn we're probably gonna lead with Metallic Mimic in the hopes of getting a counter on one of our creatures. So let's keep track of our opponent's hand. So they discarded a Glimmer of Genius, they used a Charter Course, and they played a Swamp. So all we know is Torrential Gearhulk and Charter Course left in their hand. So we untap, find a Skymarcher. Alright, so this is an interesting wrinkle. So I wanted to play the Mimic first, but now our opponent did get to look at 2 new cards plus all their draw steps, so it's pretty likely that he will have found a removal spell for the Mimic, so we could make the argument for running out Vanguard first, and then next turn we get to play Mimic plus Skymarcher in the same turn. And that also plays around Censor, or we can just run out the Mimic now. It's probably gonna get killed, but then we get to resolve whatever we want. So sure, let's just go with the highest upside play if the Mimic survives, and name Vampire, and say go. And hope for the best. Catacomb from the opponents. And they're just passing. They could still kill our Metallic Mimic in response when we go to cast a creature. And I think we're just gonna cast a Vanguard here first. I guess we could attack first with the Mimic. Our opponent might take the 2 damage before making a move. Yeah, that could be fine here. Don't see a reason not to. Takes it. And second main phase will run out the Vanguard. Gets Essence Scattered. And then the Skymarcher, which should resolve here. Alright, we get a 2/2 Skymarcher. So we're hoping to find a Swamp so we can cast our other creatures here. But our opponent hasn't answered our Metallic Mimic yet, so that's good. Legion's Landing. Alright, so let's hit for 4 and then play a Legion's Landing. Opponent takes it. I guess we can play around Supreme Will here by playing the Shefet Dunes first. Play out Legion's Landing. And our opponent is gonna Supreme Will it, and we're actually gonna happily pay for that since we don't have anything else going on. So our opponent pretty desperate here. They sacrifice Evolving Wilds, so we'll get a 2/2 token from Legion's Landing. And then we still need to draw a black source for our other cards, but we've got an okay board state going on. We still know about the opponent's Torrential Gearhulk. Now they're casting their other Charter Course, discarding a bunch of lands. And alright, they did find the Fatal Push eventually. So we won't get to transform Legion's Landing. But Mavren is an excellent draw here. As we'll get to connect with our Duskborne and get an additional Vampire. And now we're in a good spot to transform Legion's Landing next turn. Opponent finds land number 5. And yep, there's a Scarab God, which we kind of expected, so this is where Ixalan's Binding would be nice. Instead we find a Duress, so opponent has 2 cards in hand. We know One of them is Torrential Gearhulk, but it is pretty likely that the other one is a non-creature spell. Alright, I guess we can start with the Duress here, since we don't have anything else going on. Alright, Fetid Pools, Torrential Gearhulk, so that's unfortunate, but at least their opponent doesn't have anything too scary besides the Gearhulk. Well, let's go ahead and attack with the Skymarcher. I guess every damage counts here, so we should be getting in with the 2/2 Vampire as well. And of course we do get to transform Legion's Landing, which gives us enough mana to both make a token and then next turn activate Shefet Dunes if we want to. Opponent makes the obvious block. They go down to 7. And they should probably be playing out the Fetid Pools rather than keeping it in hand to cycle, as with the Scarab God you kind of want a lot of mana, so end of turn we'll make an additional Vampire. Untap, find a Forsaken Sanctuary, so we'll move to combat, see if the opponent has any removal spell they want to play that they probably should use before we attack with our Skymarcher, otherwise we get a free token from Mavren. Alright, looks like our opponent did have a removal spell, but they gave us a free Vampire token, so that's nice. Opponent gains the 2 life back, but we still got a Vampire token out of the deal. We'll play out the Sanctuary, plans to make another token with the Adanto. So our opponent decided not to play out the Fetid Pools, despite having the Gearhulk in hand. That's pretty strange. Opponent on their upkeep uses a Scarab God to get back Metallic Mimic. So they get to scry 1. And they get a 4/4. And this is naming constructs. Alright, so that's for the Torrential Gearhulk, so that it's 6/7. So we still know the opponent's 2 cards, I think, since they haven't played out the Fetid Pools yet, which they're probably going to cycle end of turn. We're just going to make an additional Vampire token, and then Sanctum Seeker should be good enough for lethal here, I think. Let's see, so if we run out Sanctum Seeker, we can attack for 6, drain the opponent for 6, they have 2 blockers, and then they still take 4, so yeah, and that should be enough. If we didn't have perfect information, then I might have made a different play, but this seems pretty safe. Attack with everyone, drain the opponent for a bunch. Opponent's gonna cycle the Fetid Pools that we knew about, and that's gonna do it. Alright, sweet. Managed to beat blue-black control. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw with a pretty interesting hand. So, don't have a lot of cheap cards here, but we do have Mimic, which is a very powerful card if we draw any other Vampire cards, and then Vona, a nice curve topper. So I think this probably keep. We also have all our colors of mana, double black, double white. And the Shefet Dunes is not a bad finisher. Mountain, go. Alright, Queen's Commission is nice if our Mimic survives somehow. Ramming up Ruins into nothing. Our Metallic Mimic is not long for this world, but we're just gonna run it out. And name Vampire. Say go. And we'll probably see something like a Shock or an Abrade end of turn. Alright, Lightning Strike also works. But now we've got a Queen's Commission to buy some time, and then Vona, hopefully to seal the deal. Adanto Vanguard to draw. I think we still go with the Commission here as it's more mana efficient. Inspiring Vantage making an appearance, not sure what that entails. Start to finish, alright, so we're up against a token deck, perhaps Mardu. The warrior tokens getting in there. I guess we might as well block, since if we're attacking they have vigilance, so they can just block on the way back. A reason not to block would be if we maybe had something like a Sanctum Seeker to follow up. Just one token getting in there, we're gonna trade. Also, we don't want these 1/1s laying around when we play the Vanguard. So I think we actually attack to offer the trade here. They might have another star to finish. No, they're just taking it. Let's play out the Vanguard and a tapped Sanctuary. Say go. So if our opponent attacks, do we block and pay 4? I think we do, since we do have this Vona coming down. And if we can stick Vona for a turn or two, we should be okay. So let's go to blocks. And after blocking, we can make it indestructible. They could respond with a removal spell, in which case we have to decide whether or not we want to pay 4 more. A Braid. Yeah, I think we want to keep our Vanguard around. And we've got some life coming our way with Vona, hopefully. So, Adanto Vanguard now double indestructible. It's gonna get rid of the Vigilance token. And we get to untap, find an Aetherborn. Alright, let's get in with the team. And then follow it up with a Vona. Over the Aetherborn. And hope the opponent can't answer Vona. They don't have the tokens in play for start to finish, and they also don't have the black mana currently, so we might be able to get an attack in. And alright, our opponent concedes. So up against what could be Mardu tokens. So what do we want against Mardu tokens? Duress might be an option. Gifted Aetherborn seems pretty good. Adanto Vanguard seems pretty poor, as our opponent can just block with 1/1s all day long. Opponent probably has some Anointed Processions in their deck, so Fragmentize could be an option. But until we see them, I don't think we bring it in. Fatal Push might be pretty bad, although it might be aggressive to take them all out. Maybe we shave 2. Vanquisher's Banner might actually also be okay if the matchup gets a bit grindy. And then I guess we'll bring in 1 Duress and try it like this. Could also see an argument for Ixalan's Binding in case our opponent has some other big threat we need to take care of. And it also deals with Anointed Procession, but it is rather expensive. So let's take a look at our opener. And this looks like a keepable, although not exciting hand, as we have double Mavren with no actual non-token vampires. But we probably still keep it. And then we can lead off with a Sanctuary into Legion's Landing plus another Sanctuary into Mavren. But hopefully we find a 2-drop vampire along the way. Plan hasn't changed. Alright, Cathartic Reunion, discarding Combustible Gearhulk and Marauders, so our opponent's probably more like a Reanimator deck than a Tokens deck. So we might have misjudged there. Duress should be pretty good, but Fatal Push is definitely not gonna cut it here. And then we might want to bring in those Ixalan's Binding to deal with Combustible Gearhulks and the likes. Keep drawing Shefet Dunes, unfortunately. So let's attack for 1, and then run out a Mavren. Of course, Mavren not making tokens when we attack with token vampires, only with non-token vampires, but he will trigger off of himself. So if he doesn't die, he can start producing tokens. Say go. No Lightning Strike end of turn, that's promising. But our opponent could have something like a Refurbish, bringing back Combustible Gearhulk, and then we're definitely in trouble. Instead it's a Sram's Expertise, and into nothing. So just making 3 tokens, and they also have a Shefet Dunes. So I think we attack with Mavren and our Vampire. And if our opponent double blocks Mavren, we can Fatal Push one of the tokens. Although I'm actually fine trading the Mavren since we have a second copy. It looks like the opponent is gonna double block Mavren and single block our token. I think we let this go. since we can't Fatal Push and play Mavren when the plan is to save the original Mavren. So now we have to decide between Mavren or Call to the Feast. Call to the Feast is more mana efficient and also lets us transform Legion's Landing next turn, so I think we'll go with that. Also sets up a Shefet Dunes activation to hit for a ton. And there we see a Glorybringer, so happy that we didn't run out Mavren there. I doubt we're gonna see it being exerted here, since opponent might be better off hitting for 4 or just even keeping it on defense. Alright, it is attacking. And it is exerting. Alright, interesting. So it takes out a Vampire. Still get to transform Legion's Landing. And Metallic Mimic, awesome. So we can run out Mimic plus Mavren here after transforming Legion's Landing. That seems pretty good. Could even just Metallic Mimic and then make a 2/2 token with the Adanto, rather than running out Mavren, which is also pretty appealing, in case our opponent maybe has a second Glorybringer. But getting Mavren in play also seems pretty good. So let's start by attacking. The advantage of going Mimic plus make a token with Adanto is that if we play Mavren next turn and attack with the Mimic, we get a token right away. But by playing Mimic and Mavren in the same turn, we kind of force our opponent to answer them both, which they might not be able to. So let's name Vampire, run out Mavren, and keep up Fatal Push. So hopefully they don't have any sweeper effect here, since that would be quite painful. And we see a Swamp making an appearance for the start to finish. Opponent at 6 mana, so they can just hardcast Combustible Gear Hulks at this point. And another Glorybringer, which kind of explains why they exerted the first one. So that's probably gonna kill our Mavren, I think. I guess it could also just kill the Mimic. Let's see. Alright, goes after Mavren. So we do need to draw something good here, otherwise we're gonna start losing our board turn after turn. Glorybringer definitely a problem card, as we can't answer it with Fatal Push. Gifted Aetherborn is also just gonna die to Glorybringer, but I guess we'll take it. So what happens if we use Shefet Dunes here? We get to attack for 5, plus 4 is 9. It's not quite enough, so I think we're just better off running out an Aetherborn and making a token with Adanto. So let's go ahead and attack. Gain some life back. And I think we make the token right now to prevent any shenanigans with instant speed removal spells on the Mimic. And we decided not to take a damage, but that means we don't get to keep up Fatal Push here. But we haven't seen any great targets for it anyways. So Glorybringer likely gonna kill the Aetherborn. Is this a third Glorybringer? Nope, Combustible Gear Hulk. Alright, I think we're just gonna take the damage here, since we're not gonna be able to win if our opponent draws 3 cards here, I think. So, no. And we took 8. 2 from Lightning Strike and a total of 6 from start to finish, which kind of explains why it's in the deck now, as it's 6 damage with Combustible Gear Hulk. So what do we need to draw here? So opponent can kill Aetherborn, then if we use Shefet Dunes next turn, opponent can block one of our 3-powered creatures and they take 6, 7, 8, 9 to 2. So we're definitely close, but I think we're still behind here. We're also falling to 8. Adanto Vanguard. So can we afford to use Shefet Dunes here? I think we Vanguard plus make a token. And then the question is, do we attack with the Metallic Mimic or just the Vampires? I think we do just attack with everyone. And hope our opponent has nothing. I guess they could always use Finish to sacrifice one of their exerted Glorybringers to kill one of our creatures. Opponent's gonna eat the Mimic. If they blocked the 2/2 lifelinker, they could have prevented us gaining 2 life. Instead, this happens. Opponent's at 6, we're at 13. We can also chump the Gearhulk with the Vanguard and make it indestructible, since that saves us 2 life essentially. But if our opponent has any relevant cards left in hand, I think we're gonna lose this one. But then we can go to sideboarding, take out this useless Fatal Push, bring in Ixalan's Binding, and some other more useful cards. Our opponent has a start, so that's gonna be an issue, as now they have 2 additional blockers. I guess if we top deck Sanctum Seeker, we could still win. If our opponent plays passively here. Glorybringer and Gearhulk get in there. Glorybringer's exerting. Targeting the Adanto Vanguard, that's interesting, so they must have some instant speed removal in hand, otherwise this doesn't make a ton of sense, since now we can make it indestructible and then block the combustible Gearhulk. Alright, that works. So that's kind of a wasted exert, since I was gonna make it indestructible anyways to block the Gearhulk. So let's go to blocks. Block there, and then end of turn we can Fatal Push one of the tokens to at least get some use out of our push. So we're down to 5. Does our opponent have a follow-up? They could cast Finish here to take out one of our creatures, sacking maybe an exerted Glorybringer. And their opponent concedes. Alright, sweet, so managed to get there anyways, so on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw here, and this hand looks like a keep. Although we do need some more action besides this, since now we have only a bunch of tokens, which might not be good enough. Concealed Courtyard, so I think we actually run out Legion's Landing turn 1 here. And then next turn we can go tap land plus another Legion's Landing. Set up this Call to the Feast. Opponent on red-green. Autoback Huntmaster, so red-green dinosaurs. Could be a tough matchup since the opponent's gonna have larger creatures, but Fatal Push is a nice pickup, so I actually think we just get rid of this Huntmaster before it does any damage. So second main play Sanctuary, say go, and go from there. Opponent has another mana creature in Drover of the Mighty, but we can attack past that one as we draw Call to the Feast number 3. So let's hit for 1. Also, our 1/1 vampires don't match up particularly well against all the enraged dinosaurs, like perhaps Ranging Raptors or Ripjaw Raptor. Opponent takes 1. And we'll run out another Legion's Landing. Sacrificing your Legion's Landing to the second copy is a nice way to enable Revolt as well for Fatal Push. So that's something to keep in mind. So we're hoping our opponent doesn't have a Ripjaw Raptor here. It looks like just a 3 mana dinosaur. Prowling Serpapard. Alright, that's fine. So now we just need to start going wide. And well, Vona is also a nice one if we can find a 5th land. So let's just run out this Call to the Feast, and then next turn we can transform Legion's Landing, which I guess is land number 5 for Vona as well. No attacks this turn, don't want to throw away a Vampire to get in for 1 damage. Opponent appears to be stuck on 2 mana, so killing their Huntmaster might definitely have worked in our favor. Mirage Mirror. I'm intrigued. So their opponent can copy artifacts, creatures or enchantments, even lands, until end of turn if they pay 2, but they're kind of stuck on mana, so that's not gonna do a whole lot for now. And Metallic Mimic is pretty awesome, but I think we're just gonna run out Vona for now. So let's attack with everyone. And try to punish the opponent stumbling on mana. And if we draw land next turn, we can go Mimic plus Call the Feast, which is also pretty powerful. Opponent takes 4, we gain 5. And let's run out the Butcher of Magan. Hope I'm not butchering that pronunciation. So let's see what the opponent can do here. Opponent attacking with the Serpopard. We will not be tricked into blocking, so we'll take 4. And another Drover of the Mighty. That's fine, so they can't use the Mirage Mirror here. Courtyard means we can't Mimic plus Call, but we'll be fine here, so we can attack with Vona, use this to destroy either the Serpopard or one of the mana creatures, probably one of the mana creatures. So let's start by attacking. Attack with everyone. And then use Vona to destroy a Drover. Opponent is scheduled to take 8 damage. And I think we're just gonna make more tokens here. Don't think our opponent has any main deck sweepers we need to worry about. And this way we can just go wide to finish off the opponents. Alright, they've finally found their 3rd land, but they still only have access to 4 mana with the Drover. And there's a Ripjaw Raptor we were worried about, but now with Vona we don't really care anymore. So we managed to find our clean answer to the Ripjaw Raptor. Untap, find a swamp. Let's just, for the Rubbins, run out Mimic plus Call to the Feast. Make some more tokens. Attack with everyone. And then use Vona to blow up the Ripjaw Raptor. And that should do it. Alright, on to sideboarding against red-green dinosaurs. So this is where Dusk to Dawn is gonna shine. Ixalan's Binding also seems pretty good. Aetherborn seems pretty good as well. And I think that's about it. What do we want to take out? I think Queen's Commission is probably gonna be pretty weak. Adanto Vanguard might not be great. So you can see shaving a few copies of those. Maybe we just take out all 4 copies. Maybe it's wrong to take out all Vanguards here, but I think we can manage without. We now have more answers to the big dinos. And a no-lander we're gonna have to mulligan. Alright, this hand's not great, but if we can find some lands we should be okay. Put that on the bottom. So our opponent can now definitely punish us with a quick start. We did find Swamp, but we need to find Plains. Although if our opponent doesn't have the fastest start, we might have some time. No turn to Drover, that's good. We draw Mavren, which would be nice if we can find the white manas. It looks like we're both monocolored so far. Prowling Serpopard, a nice kitty cat, but don't really care about it. And alright, perfect. Concealed Courtyard means we get to play out Mavren. And next turn we can either play Call to the Feast or Ixalan's Binding. Definitely the draw we needed. Meanwhile our opponent seems to be stuck on green. Alright, Ronas the Indomitable. Luckily we boarded in Ixalan's Binding, so we will be able to get rid of Ronas and any future Ronases. Another Courtyard. So let's just Binding right now so that we can also attack with Mavren and get a token. Since Ronas is active thanks to the Serpopard. So let's get rid of the god. And attack for 2. Get a token. And say go. So next turn we can Courtyard plus Call to the Feast, perhaps another Ixalan's Binding. Appetite for the Unnatural, so opponent probably expecting something like a Anointed Procession, as we did have a lot of tokens. Is also an answer to Metallic Mimic, so seems like a fine sideboard card. And definitely good against Ixalan's Binding, but I guess we'll just be doing the same as last turn. Ixalan's Binding on Ronas. Although Aetherborn is also nice, but I think we still wanna Binding the Ronas. Get in for 3, make a token, and we could even consider blocking the Serpopard going forward. But for now we're just gonna run it back. Get a token and say go. And Vona is also gonna be pretty nice if we can cast her and attack with her. a braid on our legendary vampire, but we've got another one lined up here. Does the Serpopard get in there? It does. I could actually see chumping since we want a high life total to kill stuff with Vona. So I'm actually okay chumping here, despite us still being at 13. Untap, find a Sanctuary, so next turn we can Aetherborn plus Call to the Feast, and this turn we're just gonna slam Vona. And I think we still leave our Vampire back just to chump again if our opponent attacks. Yeah, I guess it's a little risky to take the 4, since then if we pay 7, a Lightning Strike kills us. So yeah, let's just pass with the intention of chumping, and then hopefully our opponent can't kill Vona. If they go Mountain Glorybringer, then we're probably dead. And they're pretty likely to have Glorybringer given the whole Ronas situation. Instead it's a Regisaur Alpha. I've never been so happy to see a Regisaur Alpha in my life. That's gonna add a 4/4. I don't think our opponent can attack, otherwise... Well, they're attacking anyway, so now we can attack with Vona and kill the Regisaur if we want to, since we're definitely chumping here. I guess our opponent could have another follow-up Regisaur and then kill us, but we do have some blockers coming up. Mimic is also pretty nice, since we can Mimic plus Call to the Feast, which might be better than Call plus Aetherborn. But let's get things started with an attack from Vona. Attack, and then pay 7 to blow up the Regisaur. Opponent's gonna take 4. And yeah, I think we go with Mimic plus Call. It's a little more susceptible to a sweeper effect, I guess. So here's hoping our opponent doesn't have any sweepers. But otherwise we would have had to play Mimic plus Aetherborn to play around any 3 damage sweepers. Instead it's just a Drover of the Mighty, which is a 3/3, so it does block our 2/2s nicely, and a Scavenger. That's all fine. Opponent with 2 cards left in hand. Do have to keep our life total in mind if we keep paying 7. Opponent gains 2 here by exiling our Mavren. I don't think we'll see any attacks. Get to untap, find a Shefet Dunes. Alright, that's certainly interesting. So now we can use the Dunes and potentially attack with everyone. We all have good attacks here. And then we can even use Vona to blow up one of the opponent's creatures if we so desire, and then we'll gain a boatload of life. Seems worth it, so let's do that. And we can even play the Aetherborn to play defense, so that's nice. I guess we'll play it now to get the counter from the Mimic, just in case the Mimic dies. So attack with everyone. And then we want to use Vona, I think. I think we go with the Serpopard, as it just has the most power. Could also see taking out the Scavenger, as that can gain the opponent some life. Opponent's gonna double block. That's fine. We'll probably kill the Drover, as the opponent's likely to always have a dinosaur in play. So now we'll gain 9 plus 5, 14 life. Go back up to 19, opponent's at 2. So everything's coming together nicely. And we still have our Aetherborn to play defense. And alright, that does it. Sweet. I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this gameplay. And as always, have a nice day. I also want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel, and you can do so yourself as well over at patreon.com/LegenVD, where you get cool rewards for supporting the channel, as well as getting us closer to our goals, where with every goal reached we will release an additional weekly series. So if you want to see more content, Patreon is the place to go.